Thank you all for joining the November 17th operations meeting. We can get started with the fall update for the 21st Century School Buildings Program. Good morning, Ms. Hellman.
Good morning, Commissioners. Very nice to see you this morning.
So nice to see you also.
Good morning.
So, good morning. My name is Dorothy Hellman. I'm the Executive Director for the 21st Century Programs, and this is our fall update. The agenda is as noted. I'll review year 1 and year 2 school progress. Then I will speak to construction and design progress on a few of our projects. I will then review the status of the swing schools, current transportation, community engagement, internship, even though much of what we're doing is online. And then I'll close with our next opening dates for the completed schools. So of the plan year 1 schools currently in progress, we have 11 schools in plan year 1. All are open except for Patterson, which co-locates with Claremont. The building will be completed in September 2021 of next year. Keeping in mind that the old building will need to be demolished. Patterson will be relocated first, but Claremont will be delayed. That's because of the ongoing noise associated with the demo of the current building that the students are in. And then we're also going to have some further site development. We considered the environment for the Claremont students to be a little bit disruptive, and so we deferred their move-in date to May 2022 when all the work on site is done. For the plan year 2 schools, we have 17 schools under this plan. 5 are currently complete. Fairmont Harford, John Rura, Faybrook, Calvin Rodwell. The last one was Mary E. Rodman. We have 8 buildings now currently under construction, 2 are in design, and then we also have 2 in feasibility studies. Medfield Heights and Walter P. Carter, which is co-located with Lois T. Murray. These will be completed mid-year in the next few weeks, and I'll share details about those 2 schools later on. Continuing with the plan year 2 schools, looking to 2021, between the plan year 1 and the plan year 2 schools, 6 new buildings will be open next year, September 2021, the most we've had at any one time. And at that time, we're only going to have 5 buildings left in the entire program to be completed. 3 are scheduled to be completed in 2022, 1 in 2023, which is cross country, and Commodore John Rogers in 2024. And I'll talk about cross country in a little bit. Commodore John Rogers is going to be the last, since it needs to use the southeast building, which is currently a swing space being shared with Highlandtown. So now on to some construction pictures. These are the pictures of Medfield Heights. They are a little bit older in a sense that they were taken a few weeks ago when we submitted the presentation, but they do show site progress. The building currently now is pretty much complete. Here you have a view from the main entrance. You have a view from the interior of the cafetorium, the kitchen, and the classroom. Despite COVID, overall for the entire program, the projects have progressed. We did have spot cases of COVID here and there, but no mass outbreaks on site. Our practices have been really good, and we've staggered our site visits to ensure that all our staff and that of the contractors were kept safe. Our inspections are progressing on this project. We have approvals for the elevator. We have health inspection for the kitchen. The health suite has been reviewed by the state. The school will relocate from their temp location in a few weeks, and we started also installing new furniture this week as well. Progress pictures over at Walter P. Carter. This building actually co-locates with Lois T. Murray. This is also scheduled to open in the next few weeks. Work is progressing at the interior and the exterior, as you can see. And you can also see that this obviously looks to be a little bit behind Medfield Heights, and you'd be right. The site work is not quite yet completed. We're still working on the IT closet. The elevator is installed, has not yet fully received approvals from the state. And the health suite has been reviewed by Baltimore City. This one, I think we're going to say that it's going to be down to the wire on this one, but that's the time where our staff will increase our site visits and perform quality control to make sure that the building is being accepted in a manner that is good for city schools. The plan is to move in Walter P. Carter students first. Lois T. Morris students will move in June of next year. Again, that program typically prefers not to move their students in mid-year since it's a little bit disruptive to their student population. Now, cross country. I'm hoping that you had a little bit of a preview so you were able to review the justification for this. This is one of the 17 schools in year 2. It progressed all the way to design in 2019, but was put on hold when it was discovered that FEMA was remapping the school, that community, and the floodplain went from 100 years to 500 years. Which means that once in every 500 years, they're going to have a sentinel event of flooding. That meant we could not have utilities in the lower level of the building, which is where it is at now. And in the event of a flood, the school would pretty much be shut down. The solution was then to review methods to mitigate the water penetration. The MSA conducted a due diligence study, and they gave city schools 3 options to select from. And in a short nutshell, we were told to renovate per the current design, which is $31.1 million. We could renovate the existing building, which is 150, which was built in 1955. That would be $40.9 million, and that would be updated to the 500-year criteria. However, it required so many things to be done to the building that there was still no guarantee that we would not have incurred flooding in that Sentinel event. And then the third one was demo everything and build a replacement school. And that cost was $41.2 million. City schools met with the MSA, met with their architects, design team. We understand perception is one thing, you know, why are you building a new school when it could be renovated? So we made sure that we did a deep dive into everything. And in the end, we actually recommended that a new build be done because it made the most economical sense. As you can see, the delta between 40.9 million and 41.2 is really $300,000. Not only was it the most economical sense, but it would meet the ed specs. It would the building would also be a lot more energy efficient, ADA compliant, and we did the write-up for this justification so everyone knew publicly how that decision was being made. Design status, high school feasibility studies. So last year, you're aware, under the Build to Learn Act of 2020, when it was passed in the legislative session, we expected City School to receive $400 million. So this would allow us to build on the success of the 28 school buildings that we currently have. You, the board, actually approved replacing the year 3 schools with the high school program. And we were tasked with renovating 5 high schools, 8 buildings. 5 buildings, 8 schools due to co-location. We're in the middle of feasibility studies now for Baltimore City, Frederick Douglass being co-located with Joseph C. Briscoe. We've had meetings with the school, with the community, with elected officials, even with students, and we're doing 3 options. We have the strategic, we have a modernization, and we're going to have a modernization with addition. The outcome of this is to define the scope, to obtain preliminary plans in line with the ed specs that was created by city schools, and then to have a preliminary schedule and a budget for review, hopefully by January of next year. From a schedule perspective, if you had to ask, the first of the studies would be completed by spring of next year, and with an 18 to 24 month design schedule. We would not start construction until approximately 2023, And then the first building would most likely not be completed until 2025, 2026. But we are progressing with those studies right now. So on to swing location. We have 10 schools in swing right now. Medfield and Walter P. Carter will relocate in January, bringing it down to 8. We have multi-activities in process right now for relocation, including the schools packing and purging. And I know one thing, having spoken with both principals, they're very excited to move, and their move date is scheduled for December the 28th. Transportation. Even though school is not open, we've still budgeted. 9 schools will receive yellow bus transportation should we be able to move forward with opening up schools. Highlandtown and Montebello, these were just added this past summer. So the big, again, during this time of uncertainty, we continue to work with a transportation team. I do know that they're having multi-meetings to determine how to process, how the process would work in light of social distancing. I know that they have to contend with temperature tests, availability of folks to test temperatures. And as you can see, the buses would increase from 36 to 105 to bus or elementary school students. The other concern is, how do you get that many buses and drivers? So in a sense, there's a little bit of a hardship that's kind of built into that. Reimbursement is something new that the transportation team is working on as an alternative to have, maybe parents drive their kids to and from school, maybe carpooling, not quite certain. But that is something that is an option that's still being evaluated by the transportation team. Community engagement, as we're planning for yellow bus transportation, we're also engaging the community with regards to safe walking paths for our students. And we still have a few programs in queue. Over at Sarah M. Roach, we do have that walking school bus pilot program. Over at Baybrook, we're still working with Inspire for cleanup of the pathways along the walking route. And then over at Hartford, where we've kicked off construction for several months now, we're working with the city on the cleanup of alleys and making arrangements for crossing guards. Merger activities continue to be a critical part of our school openings. 2 schools merged this past summer. We had Mary U. Rodman and Sarah M. Roach students. And then we had the Curtis Bay, the middle school students only, they moved into Baybrook. COVID did impact us a bit, but we created workarounds as with everything else. The engagement team moved on and they started online activities with parents and students, meeting virtually with teachers. And we also had book bags and we had a book drive as well. We continue to host interactive merger activities online, and these include the Love Your School campaign, which we've had for a while now, the Acts of Kindness, and of course, Spirit Week. Internships, or partnership with Urban Alliance. As mentioned in the last update, we were unable to have companies participate in sponsoring students. And that was because most of our professional offices that we work with now had staff working from home. And with the construction, interior design, and architecture being hands-on, we thought that it was a risk. And they also thought it was a risk, and they still think the risk is still there. Urban Alliance has pivoted to a virtual program. We co-developed a transition to worksite plan. It's an online program where students can improve their skill sets in digital literacy. They learn about the Gmail suite, setting up accounts. They learn about presentations, charts, how to host a virtual meeting, all of which are helpful for COVID and even for a post-COVID world. The concern for us a little bit is that it's not field related. The other concern is that we've been asked to increase our contribution level from $25,000 to $90,000. And that was really to cover loss of grants, which is what Urban Alliance kind of depends on. This is still under review, but City Schools does intend to participate in this process and to continue to work with our students. Local hiring. Despite the fact that our offices were closed during COVID, we continued to provide permission through a workaround process for the necessary and the much needed construction workers to be on site to complete our schools. This was the way that we negated a lot of labor force delays on our projects. We had 547 workers accepted during this time, having only submitted some paper documentation. Now that our office has been open, and again, that's by appointment only, we worked through the backlog. Of the 466 that were currently checked, only 22 were not able to complete the FBI and the Maryland background tests. Local hiring continued. For plan year 1, our new position count is at 773 for the 11 schools. Skanska, who's working on Patterson Claremont, which is the last school being delivered under year 1, still has that tally still has not yet been finalized. We anticipate the numbers will be higher. If you're trying to get some basis as to whether or not this correlates to dollars, Forest Park, again, spent $72 million on that project. We had 140 local hires. Robert Poole, we spent $53 million on that project, had 95 local hires. Pimlico, $43 million, had 85 hires. And Patterson, again, a $95 million project. We do anticipate that, those numbers will increase. So again, these are the companies that led in local hires. Local hires for year 2. For plan year 2, the new positions are 175 and growing. The unofficial count of schools not yet completed is 203. Keep in mind, we normally tend, or the MSA normally tends to spend approximately 3 to 6 months after the project is completed to scrub the numbers. They scrub it based on social security, addresses, date of birth to ensure that we're not doubling up on numbers or that we're not overlooking anyone. Local hiring, rounding that out, workforce development. So this is a snapshot from MOED, the Mayor's Office of Employment Division. This shows their hiring stats from the start of the program through September of this year. To date, they have received 99 postings from our construction managers. That equated to 246 positions they were able to submit candidates for. Approximately 2/3 of those were actually hired. Again, some of those did not go through due to background checks. We're still running numbers on this to finalize the amount of associates, employees that actually came through MOED. Conversely, MSA had 948. This includes the number of positions filled by MOED. Again, we're kind of clearing up those numbers now. One of the things that's apparent is that the MSA and the CMs, that they have built relationships and they have outreaches where in some instances they're actually being sought out first. This is something that we're working with MOED on. And of course, there's that skill gap that kind of limits MOED with regards to who they can actually recommend for open positions. So this is still a work in progress. MSA to date has spent approximately $900 million of the $1.2 billion program. Of this, 33% equating to $345 million went to minority organizations. And here we have our save to date. We're still planning school openings despite COVID. It has not kept down the construction industry. We're very tough. We're very versatile. this is a celebration for the community. It's a celebration for the school. It's a celebration for city schools as well. The grand opening for Walter P. Carter and for Medfield is tentatively scheduled. Lois T. Murray is tentatively scheduled for January the 6th in the afternoon. I do believe that this is a half day for schools. It will likely be a hybrid event that's going to be similar to Mary E. Rodman, where we had 25 attendees in the rooms, and then we live streamed the event through City School social media account. This opening will be a single event that will cover all schools. So we are definitely looking forward to either seeing you in person or having you participate through live stream. And that, in essence, is our fall update for the 21st Century program. Any questions?
Yeah. This is Vernon Reed.
Hi, Vernon.
How are you doing, Executive Director? I guess my point, seems like it's feedback. My question relates to the fact that, especially the transportation, we're going from 36 buses to 105 buses. Do we have any learning that we've done since last summer to now that can help us in terms of how we utilize those 105 buses, how effective the 105 buses are, and more importantly, the safety of those 105? I know it's going to be a brave new world, but do we have anything in the past that can make the community feel comfortable that we can make that transition from 36 to 105?
So Vernon, unless the transportation department is online right now, I'm going to have to reach out to get them with your question and to have them respond directly to that. I know that they're working. I know it's a challenge, and I know that they've had multi-meetings, but I can't answer some of the things that they're actually working on right now. So I will reach out to them and have them provide an update.
Okay, and I guess another thing, point of clarification, maybe you can help the community because there may be community members on. Can you explain who Inspire is in terms of the partnership?
Inspire is a program that is within the Baltimore City. It's a small division. They have a small budget of approximately $500,000 or so. For every school that we have, they work within a quarter-mile radius of that school. They look at sidewalks, they look at housing, they look at homes, they look at pretty much the pedestrian pathways that take students from their home to the school. If there are improvements that need to be made along that path to ensure that our kids have safe passage, they actually work with the different agencies within the city to assist with clearing that path. They've been known to work with DOT. They've been known to work with the Department of Housing. They will help with demolishing houses. In some cases, they've actually helped with demolishing houses and or building new partnerships to build new houses, providing parking off-site, repairing concrete pathways, cutting out brushes, getting alleyways cleared, helping with lighting even in dark alleyways. So they've been very instrumental and useful to the program and to 21st Century.
Lastly, thank you for the speed presentation. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know you do have several others right after this.
And good morning. Let me interject really quick. So as far as Commissioner Reed's transportation question, I do want to say we have a February 16th Operations Committee presentation specifically about a transportation update. So Ms. Hellman can work with our transportation team to include that into a robust update for February.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bondima, did you have any questions?
Oh, no, not yet. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hellman, I have a question. If we could go back to the internship slide, if you could speak just a bit more about the funding contribution and what that increase, like, that's a pretty significant potential increase. Could you just speak to that a little bit more for us?
So normally in our partnership with the Urban Alliance, we have been paying around $24,000, $25,000 annually. That covers the cost of 10 students for summer internship on any one of our sites. This year, due to COVID, Urban Alliance, who actually relies a lot upon grants from different organizations, actually had had a lack of funding this year. Again, it's very apparent, and that's because not many organizations have maybe excess cash. Now that they have this lack, they're asking organizations such as ours, including the 21st Century Program, if we could increase our giving this year or during this process of COVID to actually make up for that lack of grants, because it does help to keep students in the program and to get their skill sets refined, even as we're preparing them from high school to look for work outside, or to go back to school during that period between high school and either going back to work or going to college. So that deficit that's there, we're still looking at it with regards to how do we approach it, because currently, again, the program that they're offering is specific to online learning skills versus a hands-on, which is what design and construction is all about. We're not going to opt out of the program this year. We definitely do think that those skill sets of learning how to navigate the online world is still important to students. We're just trying to measure, do we fund, how much of this $90,000 do we fund for the students?
And there's no opportunity to increase the number of students? It would just stay at the 10?
It would stay at the 10, correct. Whenever you incrementally increase the amount of students, you're also incrementally increasing the amount of contribution.
Thank you, Ms. Holman.
You're welcome.
Before we let her go, are there any other questions? I don't think so. Thank you so much, Ms. Holman. We can prepare for the next presentation from Food and Nutrition Services. Okay. Am I welcoming Ms. Marchetta?
Yes, thank you. Please let me know. Good
morning, Ms. Marchetta.
Have any issues seeing my presentation. My name is Elizabeth Marchetta. I'm the Executive Director of Food and Nutrition Services, and I'm excited to present here to you today about some of the work our team has been doing. So the purpose of this annual update is to just provide some context to the Board Operations Committee on the status of food and nutrition operations. It's a report from the prior year's activities, as well as a peek into the coming school year's programs. So these are some of the guiding principles of our Food and Nutrition Services Department. These are taken from the Baltimore City Schools Wellness Policy and Sustainability Policy. This is an overview of the meal programs available to our schools. And as you will see on here, we offer breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper. There's a fresh fruit and vegetable program and a food pantry program that we partner with Maryland Food Bank to offer. I also just want to highlight the summer meals program on here, which is actually the method by which we've been offering meals since the original COVID closures in March. This program allows meals to be served to youth under the age of 18 and is not required to be attached to attendance at a particular school building. So it provides school districts with more flexibility for the meals that they're serving. This fall, we have approximately 50% of our school buildings open for public, members of our community to come and pick up meals for their families. We're offering up to 2 days worth of meals. So that would be 8 meals, 2 of breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper. And our sites are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on school days. We also have fresh fruit and vegetable boxes that will supplement meal offerings on select days and additional boxes from our city partners. If you're trying to find a list of our meal sites, you can go online to baltimorecityschools.org/meal sites. You can also use a search tool that our mapping team developed and look for the sites that are closest to you. You can also see some examples of some of the meals that have been prepared and served by our team during this time. I always want to take time to remind people about the nutrition standards that we follow with our meal service. We have very strict caloric and different food component groups and subgroups that we need to meet to make sure that we're offering our students high quality meals, with strict limitations in saturated fat and sodium levels. And these are set, by the USDA at the federal level. Additionally, we've always been committed to offering fresh fruit at every meal. We really do try to prioritize purchasing local products, so milk, bread, and produce. We don't have any high fructose corn syrup in our bread or milk and are trying to drive that out from all over the products that we offer. You'll also see here our grains that we offer are whole grain rich, and we do have a pork-free menu. This is some of the flyers that our team used to market some of the new items that we were offering last school year. Unfortunately, it can be a little bit more difficult to highlight some of our new items when kids aren't physically in buildings, but we, are doing a lot to do taste tests with students and put new items on there and, expand the offering of entrees that we have. So
Liz,
people can, yes.
I'm sorry, Liz, I raised my hand. This is Chris Doherty, your
yes.
colleague, and I am interrupting. Can you go back 2 slides? I want to maybe say something that you're reluctant to, and that is you sped through very efficiently, but the locally sourced milk, bread, and produce. And I wanted to raise a comment, one for you to confirm that I'm correct, and then also I think the board might like to hear it. And that is the USDA already has pretty stringent Buy American requirements, which is of course understandable. We have lots of farmers and lots of food producers, and but it's an administrative task to satisfy the Buy American, which is and a lot of fruit and vegetables could possibly come from elsewhere, so it's not as easy as it might sound. But the point I'm raising, and I want you to expand on if you would, is you and your team have intentionally gone above any of those requirements and have made an intentional effort to buy local when it comes to produce, as well as milk and bread. And milk and bread are kind of lend themselves more perhaps to buying local because of freshness and shelf life. But what I want to raise is you took it upon yourself to intentionally buy more produce locally, which benefits the freshness for our kids. It benefits local farms and local producers. And you went in and did that. And we're going to try to emulate that in other procurement related activities. But I thought you might say a word or two that you didn't raise because you didn't want to sound like you were congratulating yourself. But can you tell us a little bit about the buy local provision that you muscled up recently?
Yeah, so this is something that we had, first established in our district's wellness policy, and it's something that we've worked on, depending on the vendor and the actual menu type or the menu item we're talking about. It's going to be a very different way to measure and track the local spend. So it is actually part of our contract. A produce distributor. We want to strongly encourage, local relationships to be developed with the distributor. I actually wasn't being so humble, Chris. I do have a later slide that talks about some of this stuff, so don't worry, I'll show that to you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's no worry. And also feel free to interrupt me because I'm presenting. I can't see if anyone's hand is raised. And I will run through these slides at a quick pace. But don't worry, that is coming. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions now, I'll move forward and we'll get to that slide pretty soon. So unfortunately, we don't have it, designated specifically on our menu what our local items are. But I do want to draw attention that we do have all of our menus published on the district website. We also have a really excellent menu app that people can go to see specific allergen and caloric information for each items. Families that have specific allergens they're trying to avoid can actually filter the menu so that all of those items are identified and they know exactly what is there. We also do accommodations for special, dietary needs. And this is just, a snapshot of that form that would need to be completed and returned to the cafeteria manager and school nurse so that we can make sure the school has a plan for making the necessary accommodations. This slide shows a snapshot of our meal participation metrics. I do want to note that this is limited to the National School Breakfast Program and the National School Lunch Program. So this slide, for purposes of last school year, only covers our numbers up through March when we had the school closures. You'll see that there was a slight decrease in the meal participation for last year before our closures, but I would say that a lot of that is probably due to the fact that we have lower meal participation during the winter months. And so we never really, had an opportunity to bring those back up in the end of the spring. This next slide shows the meal participation information for the time from school closure in March. It was March 16th. Our staff was back out there on sites. We started with around 10 or 12 sites and quickly expanded to 18 that operated from March through the end of August when we closed to prepare for our back to school operations. In addition to having these 18 meal sites that were open daily, we were also fortunate enough to be able to get support from some local foundations to provide home delivery for some of our medically fragile and high needs students. And then we also assisted the city with, putting out USDA produce boxes. And we had, incredible partnerships with World Central Kitchen, where they helped us to do distribution of prepackaged meals. So, the one thing I do want to point out here is that we had only 18 sites operating, which is about 10% of our regular school day sites that we would have had operating. And so we actually, from this time from March through August, only served 516,000 meals to children. And during a normal non-COVID time, we would have served over 5 million meals. So, we did really excellent things, and our people really had to pivot a lot to make sure we were able to open sites and open them safely. But, we did serve a much fewer number of meals than we would during this time frame, simply because we had fewer sites open. That being said, I want to take time to acknowledge our city agencies and partners that really did step up and help to fill in the gap that was caused by widespread school closures. So Baltimore City Parks and Recreations, the Housing and Community Development, World Central Kitchen had things beyond their partnership with our sites that they were offering. And so I just really cannot overstate how critical our city partners were in serving meals during this time. And this just shows you a snapshot of the meals that were served throughout the city. And Parks and Recreation really was serving the lion's shares of meals. This slide shows you a snapshot of the meals served throughout the state of Maryland during the first 20 weeks of the pandemic. And you will see that we did, as a city, collectively with our various agencies, serve over 5 million meals. So it's not that there wasn't, food available that was out there. We simply were a smaller portion of the meals that did go out, because we had so many other agencies participating and supporting this effort during this time. I think the other, thing that I like to note in this slide is the fact that the second largest server of meals at a county level in Maryland was Montgomery County. And just, the nature of where we are as a city, but as a state and country in terms of, people, all across the spectrum needing access to benefits they didn't need before. And we all did see that there were, pretty dramatic changes in the environment and food security in our communities since the COVID closures. So there was a dramatic increase in the number of SNAP applications that we saw. And when the city did our own food and technology survey, more than half of the families that responded indicated that they needed food support. This map on the right shows you, with the darker shades, the neighborhoods and areas that indicated higher levels of need. So you have all probably seen this slide in the plan for reopening. for the district, but I did just want to, put it up there quickly so people see that we have thought through various models for serving kids, who are in a virtual model now and will be until, all of this ends, as well as thinking about how we are starting to serve children in the small groups that are on site and in person, because we need to have different methods set up for that. In selecting our sites for this, fall's operation, these were a couple of, well, not a couple, there's several metrics that were on here. And again, our planning and mapping team did an amazing job of helping us to look at various data sources and just make sure that we were, thinking through the variety of ways that the community might have need and where we were doing our operations and the status of the building and, the level of community needs. So they are spelled out here. And there's also some maps on here that show you the location of the meal sites, which are in green, and the various indicators in the city that we looked at. I also just want to shout out to our team, who is really out there, since day one, and we've really been trying to work through the difficulty of, adopting a food service operation that was, built and established to serve meals to kids who are physically in a building, to being a to-go operation, and really figuring out ways, to make sure that we are maintaining social distance, and the highest level of safety procedures during this time. So we've really had some excellent people who have stepped up over this time. And I just want to give a special shout out to Ms. Tawanda Carter on the right there, who's one of our regional cafeteria managers and is constantly on site supporting her operations and making sure, they have the support that they need. Both Sinclair Lane and Alexander Hamilton, even though it is a very small school, really served a much larger community than their traditional school population during this time. And Alexander Hamilton and Sinclair Lane both topped over 1,000 meals on some of their high volume days. So I just want to thank them. Also, we had really great innovations that we saw at the school level. So this shows you Henderson Hopkins, where they not only had a walk-up model, and you can see, from the customer perspective on the picture in the left here, and on the right, there was a drive-up, line, and people could just pop their trunk and have a contactless, food drop. So that was excellent. And these are some of the meals. I always just like to show people what students are actually getting. So these were from Hollibird and Cherry Hill Elementary Middle School. And if Chris was afraid I wasn't going to touch on it, it's right here. This slide also just shows you we do try to promote local purchasing when possible. So Cloverland Green Spring provides milk and juice to our schools. We have Coastal Sunbelt that provides our commercial produce. We have Schmidt Baking Company that does our bread. And then we have Keeney Produce, which is actually part of the USDA Department of Defense Produce Commodity Program.
Liz?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Liz. Commissioner Reed has his hand up, and he's too respectful to jump in like I was.
Yeah, go ahead. Again, I can't see you.
Oh, this goes back. I'm sorry to be regressive, but go back to page 15.
What are we looking?
The reason I say page, keep going. I think at 17. Next page. Yes, I'm looking at this. And it says Baltimore City, an increase in SNAP applications was upward 600%. A 400% increase in SNAP assistance in the state. I look at this and then I go back to page 11. And going back to page 11, I think it's 12. Yeah. One more. Yeah. How does page 15 repurpose the institution and impact on 2021 in terms of the whole approach to feeding kids in Baltimore City public schools? Because it looks like in terms of food safety, there has to be more done. The good thing is you have more partners now. So once we get past COVID, will we continue to have the partners and can go back from spending 15 million to 23 million, but still have the partners where we can help more families and more kids in less advantaged communities? I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of the big picture going forward, because what I'm learning on page 17 is we need to do more, Baltimore City needs to do more, and also partners need to do more.
Yeah. I will guess the unique nature of this pandemic is that schools have closed, which we've never really had before. And I have looked at some of the federal data that looks at where did families get meals during this time, and it looked at breakdowns by food pantries or neighbors or schools. And the vast majority of families nationwide with kids went to schools and received meals from schools. So I will say, there's not so much of a link between this slide and number 15, as I would say, as I would say this next slide, that shows, one, we served a lot fewer meals, but that they were really taken up and served by our other city partners during this time. I think, depending on the type of partner that we're talking about, some people are always doing summer meals. The partnership with World Central Kitchen was something new. They are not a, continuous, provider of meals, but people like the city's Department of Parks and Recreation, housing and community development, they typically do provide meals during the summertime. I would say one of the major reasons why we scaled up the number of sites from 18 to more than 80 this fall was because that at least, maybe it was until the first week of school, after schools had already started, USDA was not allowing other city agencies to operate the summer food service program. And they were trying to only allow schools to be offering breakfast and lunch to families so that community groups would have not been able to fill in this sort of safety net. So, they did eventually extend the summer food service program through the end of this current school year. But because of the delays in that, that was one of the big drivers that we ended up opening so many more sites. And I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that, as you point out, we have very dramatic levels of need in our city and really need to be mindful. But I would also say that our 83 sites are not the only sites running now. There are probably, I would guess, more than 150 sites throughout the city that are offering meals to children. The last thing I would just add is that, unfortunately right now, we have to, I think, struggle with a federal meals program that is built around providing meals to children in school. So providing meals to adults is something that we did through August, and I think is, a great thing that we should be doing. But I also think that the USDA Child Nutrition Program doesn't allow for that in how it is set up. So there are certain levels, there are certain changes or needs that were identified during this time, say for providing meals to adults, that glaringly came out that we should be doing more to, advocate for with the child nutrition reauthorization in the coming year. But, I think there are a lot of partners out there in Baltimore City, very small, maybe food pantries in churches that are doing a tremendous amount of getting stuff out there too, and are still doing that. And one thing that might not, be highlighted on here that I also want to point out is, especially as we move into these winter months, the city is maintaining its home delivery box program for families who are quarantined or who can't leave to get meals delivered. And that is not restricted by people's age. So I'm happy to, share more information about that. Or you can go to, Be More Children or the city's health department website. That we all have information about those home delivery boxes.
Yeah, you're a step ahead of me. Can you talk also to, this is my last question. It's a two-part question. Can you talk also to the situation of food truck delivery and home box delivery, and also the future of that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You went out for a second.
Okay, one is food truck delivery, and the other is home box delivery. How that's working now, and what's the future of that once we go back to the whatever normal is?
Yeah. So the home box delivery program has had various funders, and that is something really that it's best to the city, is the one that runs and manages that program. They have worked with Amazon on some of these, the actual delivery for that. We currently right now as a district do not have a food truck, but hopefully, in the next month or two, we will have one. Our team has actually been working on that pre-COVID just as a way to be more accessible during the summer and at our high school sites. So hopefully that is something that, we will actually be piloting out there in the, spring and summer months for next year. The city's housing and community development, they do have a mobile meal routes that they're running, and the Family League as well. So there are people that are out there. They have routes that they will adjust and adopt as needed. Some of those have scaled back. Every agency has, had to reassess things differently from the fall, from the summer. But those do exist during the summertime in the city. So, and hopefully next year we'll have one out there as well.
Thank you, and everybody, thank you for your time. Sorry, thank you.
No worry. So to move ahead. This is just, a table that shows our local food expenditures from the past 3 years. And, even though we, served a lot fewer meals, our team really did an excellent job last year with getting local when possible. The one thing I do want to show you here, or really highlight here, is the Keeney produce, which is the USDA Department of Defense commodity program, allows us to, purchase USDA commodity products. So that's at a steep discount to commercial prices, but we can still access local food through there. And we actually spent $266,000 of an over $900,000 allocation. And this is remarkable to me because Baltimore City got 37% of the entire state of Maryland's allocation for this Department of Defense produce program. And the next highest allocation to any other county in Maryland was Baltimore County, and they received $225,000 to buy, this free produce through Keeney. And so I just want to highlight that our team was able to purchase more local produce through this program than any other district had allocated in this program throughout the state. So, we have an excellent menu planning and procurement team, and they have really done an excellent job at prioritizing this over the past couple of years. So I want to shout them out.
Excuse me, Ms. Marchetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Bondema, I see your hand, but I would really like for Ms. Marchetta to get through her presentation. You'll be the first person to provide questions when she's done.
Okay. All right. Closing in there, we always are trying to promote seasonal eating. These are just some of our social media posts from Farms to Schools Month this year. And the last thing I'm just going to touch on is our Farms to Schools programming and Great Kids Farm. Many of the commissioners have been there, and we hope to see you again once we're really open for more programming. But because this is a full year report, I did just want to, share the slide, which shows some of the in-person stuff that did occur last year. And a lot of the programming has been built on historically, in-person events at Great Kids Farm, as well as field trips. In addition to things like vegetable and herb seedling distribution. Additionally, these programs really focus on supporting school meals. We know that there are many public health and educational benefits to doing food system education to students, and we really try to make this a highlight of our Farms to Schools program. So during the transition from schools closed, our Farms to Schools team really stepped into action. They actually developed the second grade field trip that is aligned with the second grade science curriculum for the virtual space, and it was designed for teachers to use this in the classroom, but as a public presentation, and everyone is welcome to check it out. They also hosted FaceTime the farmers, so online classes could come and the farmer would introduce them to the various animals, and they, depending on the level, would have, things like scavenger hunts, asking questions, making observations, and really just, seeing what was going on at the farm during this time. And I believe our team is actually booked now through December for these. Lastly, we have these activity kits that are going home to students. They have science-aligned content, and these were developed and packed by our youth interns at the site. And we really do try to focus a lot of these activities to provide youth employment. So you can see some photos there. And then lastly, I just want to touch on, our commitment to sustainable operations. I mentioned before that, we had a lot of the USDA fresh produce programs, so we were able to reduce our overall food costs by focusing on using up our commodity entitlements last year. We've also maintained our commitment to sustainable packaging during this time. We haven't fallen back on things like styrofoam or plastic bags, although I will note that it is difficult and there are just shortages in, to-go materials and packaging for food services across the nation now. We are piloting remote temperature sensors in our fridge and freezers to help us reduce food loss during this time. And we're sending home vermicompost kits through our Farms to Schools program this fall. So we're excited about those things. And that is the conclusion. You can take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marchetta. Commissioner Bondima?
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. It was very informative. And one thing that and I'm sure you might have mentioned already, and maybe I missed it, you don't serve poultry, meats, and fish. Is that correct?
We don't serve pork. We have a pork-free menu.
Okay, pork, but I saw a lot of poultry, like chicken and some meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do serve a lot of chicken. We do serve beef. So we do have meat that is on there. Last year, we did a 5-day-a-week vegetarian entree option. So we started incorporating, I think there was a veggie burger that was on the menu. We had some roasted red pepper hummus and parts of that. So there are more vegetarian options that we are trying to put out there. Sometimes it is it's tricky. I will say when we have looked at food waste, we have the meat and protein products are the least wasted out of all of our food products.
The meats, all the meats and poultry, they're already cooked, done or uncooked before they pick them up, and when they're delivered, they're all cooked, prepared.
Yes, we don't serve raw. Our meat will come in frozen. It'll be cooked and then frozen, and then we will, finish it on site. So it will be reheated before being served.
And so families who come to pick it up in boxes, and that it's the same as if they come in through the cafeteria area to pick it up.
Correct. Or say, I don't want to compare us to McDonald's, but I do. It should be a to-go experience. You get it, you pick it up, and it's ready to eat. You don't have to wait. Or do further preparation. Now, if you pick up a produce box, you might have to do further preparation unless you're prepared to eat, raw broccoli, but certainly an onion.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Commissioner Reed, did you have any additional questions?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Marchetta, thank you so much to you and your team for your contributions, your intentionality around feeding our students and their families during such an unprecedented time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the budget update. Should I welcome Courtney and Chief Dotery?
Hello, good day. Can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I will attempt to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see the budget update slide?
Yes.
All right. So good day. This is Courtney Desibay from the CFO office. So I'm going to be presenting our monthly budget update. I will be sharing time today with Kim Hoffman, the Executive Director of Data Monitoring and Compliance, who will at the end go through some of our COVID-related grant funding. But update, the table of contents. So we're going to go through the spring projected enrollment versus the 9/30 actual enrollment that we use to fund schools, the changes in the charter funding formula for FY21, and also the adjustments for the Fair Student Funding model for FY21. And then, as I mentioned, Kim will take over for the grant funding conversation. So the first slide here is on projected versus actual enrollment change. And I have a slide following this. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but it explains, some of the different numbers that you see. So I'll get to that after this. But initially here, what we are doing is comparing how we funded schools, the projected spring numbers that we use to fund schools, what was in the budget book that was voted on, what was in the July 1st budgets that schools received, to the 9/30 enrollment that we just completed and are doing enrollment adjustments based on. So what you're seeing is a decline in the enrollment from the projected amount to the current funding amount. And as you can see from the numbers, the biggest area of decline was in pre-K. So this impacts the per pupil amounts that we see for charters. It impacts the per pupil amounts that we see for traditional schools and the allocation of the funding that's already been provided. So this does not change anything in terms of the global budget. All it is within the actual budget that's already been assigned, it's reallocating the funding within the schools. So as I mentioned, I have a slide here that kind of talks about that a little bit. I know, it's pretty frequent that we see multiple numbers. We'll see numbers from OAA that get presented, the state funding numbers that go to MSDE. We see numbers talking about enrollment projections. We see numbers talking about enrollment adjustments. So we just wanted to kind of clarify how those numbers fit together. So for example, right now, this time of year is the time of year where we're talking about enrollment adjustments, which is only related to internal funding for the current fiscal year. So in this case, fiscal year 21. So we take the 9/30 enrollment information and rearrange the dollars within schools, like I mentioned. This time of year, which adds some confusion, we also talk about the official state enrollment. So both of them are taken as of 9/30, but they're used for completely different things. The official state enrollment is what is sent to MSDE for our funding for fiscal year 22, so the upcoming fiscal year. So those two numbers, while they're taken at the same time, they are slightly different because they're different business rules in terms of how they're treated. For example, the internal Fair Student Funding and enrollment numbers, we cut off as of 9/30, and we take a certain amount of ineligible students that are taken off because of whether it's immunizations, attendance, different factors. The official enrollment, which goes to MSDE, they allow a few more days into October, or actually the month of October, into the count in terms of student eligibility. So if a student attends, in our original business rules for Fair Student Funding, if the student attends, one day in September, they become eligible. For the MSDE numbers, if a student attends one day in September or in October, they become ineligible. So they become eligible. So you could have more students become eligible in the official state numbers for that reason. Also, there was an update this year, an allowance where we had students who normally would have been ineligible because of immunization that have been allowed to be counted for the state enrollment numbers, the numbers that are submitted to MSDE, which is not the case for the FSF, the Fair Student Funding numbers that we used internally. So I know these can be a little bit confusing, which is why we included this slide on how they fit together. And sometimes you look at the numbers and say, well, it says, 74,000 here, but it says 73 something over here. And just how those, kind of fit together is what we're trying to clarify. Before I proceeded with the presentation, is there anything that you wanted to ask pertaining to the enrollment numbers, while we're on the topic here?
Yes, I have one question. I guess my
Sure.
question because of the projected number going from 79 to 76 and the base going from 57 to 55, are we asking or being able to get do no harm from state, federal, and all our funding sources in terms of our monies?
Right. So as I was explaining before, these numbers that we're presenting here regarding Fair Student Funding have zero implication for our revenue, the money that's coming in from the state. So you will probably be seeing within the next, few days or few weeks, the numbers from OA that are going to the state for our funding. So those are different from the numbers that are used here. And they don't isolate like base students and, some of the other factors that we do here. I'm
just talking about expected funding we receive based on your seat. I'm looking at the number. I'm just thinking the big picture. Are we able to get or try to get a do no harm approach where, irrespective of the decreases, we get as much money as we got last time?
That is what we're hoping for. So some of the hold harmless that we received from the state, if you recall from the legislative presentation that we had earlier in the week, some of that is not mandated. We receive it based on the governor granting that amount. It had been 11 million in some years, 7 million in the most recent years, but there is no actual mandate for that to continue. We're hoping that it does. We don't yet know if that will be the case. That's part of what will be discussed within the next few months, and we'll find out by usually the second or third week of January what the allocation is. As of right now, some of the formulaic calculations are not mandated to necessarily continue. We were supposed to be transitioning into the new Kerwin funding model, which we know is not the case right now. So we're assuming that the old model will still persevere and that we will receive some of that funding to make up the gap in between. But I also want to clarify that the projected spring number that you see here, the 79,000, is an increase over what the actual number was last year that we got funded on. So this projection was based on the pre-COVID idea that we had sort of like bottomed out in terms of our enrollment decline. If you remember last year, our enrollment for the first time didn't take a significant, decrease as it had over the last, 4 or 5 years. So we at the time, particularly in conjunction with looking at our EL population increases, which are going up, significantly, we're making the assumption of the projections that we had sort of reached the bottom of our decline and we're starting to, arc back up slightly. And that's what you see reflected in that projected spring number, which again, of course, was pre-COVID-19, which, has a negative impact on some of the actual enrollment information. Does that help, Commissioner Reed?
Can I chime in as well?
Sure.
I would just say in general, just to add to what Mr. Desabei is saying, is a kind of an energetic yes to Commissioner Reed's question, that we don't want to overstep as far as lobbying and things like that. There are certain, but yes, we also don't want to not say the obvious, which is we're extremely hopeful that in these unprecedented times, the decrease that you see in these slides for next year's funding will not be unnoticed by certain decision makers in Annapolis and elsewhere. And as Mr. Desabei said, we have benefited from Governor Hogan's hold harmless decisions in the past, but those have been de facto decisions. They haven't been de jure. You can take it to the bank decisions until they happen. And with the decrease that you're pointing to, Commissioner Reed, the impact would be greater. So while we're extremely grateful for the recent years hold harmless decisions, those were, quote, normal years, and they were much smaller numbers. So like we've talked about in other meetings, we frankly hope to, and I don't think it's untoward to say it out loud. We hope that our state would follow the lead of other states, certain other states, where they're making it official. They're saying, hey, we're going to hold you harmless in this year, very unprecedented year, with this 1 year gap between taking head counts now that will dramatically impact funding in the next year. We hope that the hold harmless practice will be formalized in the year that we need it the most. We've always appreciated it, but this is the year we need it the most, and other states are doing it, and we hope that will also be our case. And I think, but that's just on top of Mr. Desabei's numbers. But yes, we sure do.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Courtney. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I have a question, just as a point of clarity. What were the actual numbers for last fall? So that it's actual fall last year to actual fall this year. And then I guess like a second part of that question is, what was the funded enrollment for last year, and what is the funded enrollment for this year?
So our submitted numbers last year that we got funded on for fiscal year 21 for K to 12, if you take out pre-K and ineligibles and you add in seed schools, was 73,532.5 students. So do not compare that with like the total numbers you see here. It would be more comparable to like the K-12 numbers that you see there. Again, these numbers are different criteria, different eligibility criteria they use for different things. But if you had to, that is where you would kind of compare that. And the reason for the fractions, the 73,532.5, our part-time students get counted as a fraction. It can be 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, etc.
Thank you, Courtney.
No problem. All right, so the next section that we have is the charter formula comparison. So all things in the charter formula in terms of revenue and deductions are held constant, which is what we have agreed to during the enrollment adjustment process. The only change in the formula is based on enrollment as indicated in the previous slide. So that 73,628. As you can see, is the total enrollment for the district, which is what you divide to get the per pupil amount for the charter formula. That is the only thing that changed from the spring projected formula to the enrollment adjustment formula. So because of that, the charter per pupil went up from 9111 to 9304. In terms of the fair student funding side of the equation, which is traditional schools, when we did the calculations, we kept the base per pupil flat at 5,568 per pupil. We kept all the weights the same. So the goal here was that any of the changes in school funding would be based on enrollment. And also we know that we're going from a higher enrollment number to a lower enrollment number at the school level. So that meant there was a certain amount of savings derived from maintaining the per pupil and weights at the same level. So what this does is, this is intentional. We know that we are in a situation where we have a hiring freeze, where we have restricted spending for other than personnel items. And also that, there are other changes ongoing, with schools over the next few months as we go into adjusting for the schools that are transitioning into the building or in-person learning. So there are a number of other factors which kind of had an impact on this, which is also the reason why we're doing the enrollment adjustment process now. But we're doing it in a more restricted way than we normally would. So part of this is to reduce the ask on principals, knowing that they have so many other things going on. There's a certain portion of it that we're handling internally, but also we know that some of it does not factor in like it would in a normal year, where school leaders have full range of their other than personnel budgets and they can spend on things in a less restricted manner. So this year, some of these changes, even though you may have more OTPS or other than personnel funding, it doesn't mean that you can apply it like you would in a normal year. So for all intents and purposes, even though that funding goes up or goes down, it doesn't affect the practicality of the school the same way that it would in another year. So knowing that, we went through the changes to minimize as much of an impact on school leaders as we could to retain as much additional funding as we could, knowing that there are a number of purchases, as we've discussed at numerous meetings before, that we're taking on behalf of schools in central office. So that being the plan, we kept the per pupil the same, we kept the weights the same. So then, changes were just based on enrollment, and also mitigated the amount of transactional input that was needed from principals, so that we could, kind of make the process a little more streamlined as far as they're concerned. Are there any questions on this, or any of the fair student funding or traditional school updates? The next slide will be going into the grant funding, which Kim Hoffman will be taking over. So if you have any questions, you can let me know. All right, thank you. Kim, all yours.
Thanks, Courtney. Good morning, everyone. So I believe an update was requested on the COVID relief funding that City Schools has received. To date, we have received 6 separate COVID relief grants, one of them through the City of Baltimore. The rest of them are all subsets of the CARES Act funding. A few of these grants, the CARES Technology, CARES Tutoring, Those grants have already ended. They were incredibly short turnaround grants, and we are on track to fully spend those. Same with the City of Baltimore grant that was supporting device purchases. Courtney, if you want to go to the next slide. Within the grant funds that we received, portions of the grants were allocated, or a proportional share, to charter schools. The charter schools had the opportunity to write individual spending plans based on the guidance for each of these grants. The only grant they did not receive a share of was the broadband grant, because that was a competitive grant. Also, for the ESSER fund, the top grant, and the second one, the GEAR fund, that came to us through the CARES Act, we were required to do an equitable share for private schools. So those amounts are listed there. And you can see what was support for all of our schools, meaning charter schools and traditional schools, as well as the funds that are supporting traditional schools only. And on the next slide, Courtney, thank you. Here is just a quick high-level breakdown of what the district is leveraging each of these grant funds for. Within the ESSER fund, kind of a companion to what Liz was sharing around the food and nutrition update, we did put $18 million of our ESSER fund, and that is money that's counted in benefiting charter and traditional schools, to help offset the salary and fringe cost of our food service workers that are currently not working because of school closures, so that we maintain them as employees without a need to lay them off, but have a way to pay their salary, since we do not have that revenue from serving all of those meals. The other largest purchase within our ESSER fund is to support the technology and hotspot needs for our students. And actually, there are purchases in here that are benefiting staff, as well as other expenditures to support our initial response to distance learning. The GEAR fund was provided to us solely for technology, and that has basically been fully expended, with the funds for the traditional school students to secure devices. And the charter schools are also almost finished spending those funds as well. Our CARES tutoring grant is a subset of the CARES Act that actually came to us. It's part of the Treasury Department funds. So it had a very, very short turnaround. All of the money needs fully paid out, liquidated, et cetera, before the end of this year. So our actual program on this grant has already concluded, so that we had time to get all of those bills paid. But as the name says, this is a grant around tutoring. So it really provided materials to support our teachers with tutoring. It provided vendor supports to provide tutoring. And a lot of the tutoring initiatives that we started within this are being continued leveraging Title I funds. So students in Title I funds didn't just get tutoring for September and October and it ended, but most of that is being continued leveraging other funding sources. CARES technology, our CARES tutoring also supported purchasing diagnostic assessments. So our teachers and schools had more tools to assess where our students were, identifying learning gaps, and then working through the materials this grant was providing to address those gaps. On top of that, some professional development. Our CARES technology grant, again, more money for those devices we so needed for our students, but we also leveraged that grant to buy a large number of headsets. A lot of our students, either in the student learning centers, need those headsets to do that work in a room with other students, or some of our students need those headsets at home because they may not have that quiet environment to be doing their online distance learning. So we are issuing headsets to students as well as the devices. CARES technology also supported purchasing additional wireless access points for our school buildings to ensure we have that connectivity necessary when students come back in buildings around some of the synchronous learning that we are doing. The fifth grant, the City of Baltimore grant, was just for devices for students. Again, that's pretty much fully spent, other than some charter schools working to pay bills because some of the challenges of getting devices in hand. And the final grant for broadband, which was solely for either wireless, or we are also using it to support paying for the Comcast Essentials program to ensure our families have access for internet for distance learning. So that was a lot of information about the 6 COVID grants. So certainly if there are any questions or specific pieces, commissioners, you have, I would be happy to support you in addressing those questions.
Commissioner Bondima, Commissioner Reed, any questions?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Commissioner Reed?
Great presentation. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the budget presentation. I also do not have any additional questions. We can move on to procurement.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Joe Vogel, the Interim Director of Procurement. There are 3 items on the agenda today. The first is the contract increase with Carey Sales and Services from $600,000 annually to $4.6 annually. It's an increase of $4 million. The contract provides for the purchase of various kitchen equipment based on contractors' bid rates and a discount off of catalog prices. The projected cost is for additional freezers and refrigerators that'll be needed to support a partial remote model so that food can be stored and distributed in support of sending meals home for days that students are participating in distance learning. The board originally approved the agreement July 23rd of 2019, and it has a contract term of July 24 of 2019 through July 23rd of 2020 with a 2-year renewal option.
Joe, do we still have Ms. Marchetta on the call? I just wanted to know, do we have an actual quantifiable number of additional pieces of equipment that we're purchasing with this contract increase?
Liz, are you still here? I can find that out for you.
Thank you. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, because Joe, my question to the same.
My hand is up as well. Thanks.
Yeah, my question, Ms. Marchetta, I'm sorry. I guess
no, go ahead.
My question is, you're going to buy this for COVID. What happens to these equipment once we get through COVID? Because we're basically going from 600,000 to 4. So we're spending $4 million for this equipment. Once COVID's done, how are we going to utilize this equipment?
Okay. I will ask Liz, and I will get back to you.
Sorry, this is Chris. Liz is on. I think she's just dealing with her mute button or something.
Do you mind, Vernon, that I join in with your question? Because my question is basically yours and I want to extend it. Do you mind?
Please, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you might be able to answer all of this at one time. It is important to know what you're going to do with the equipment, but also you added $4 million as an increase. And then you mentioned in your presentation, written presentation, that it would be annual, and I didn't understand that. It said annually. In addition to that, if you're buying equipment now and then we don't know what the future holds, why would you include this to get approval for 2 additional years or 1 additional year? And what happens to the type of equipment that you're getting, I'm sure has X amount of years warranty on it. We're talking about 1 or 2 years, but most equipment have, and I don't know about equipment in industrial school or in a school or whatever. Equipment is usually 10, 15 years or maybe 10 years. I'm clearly not understanding any of this.
Yeah, so thank you. So I guess I'll try to address it. One, this is an increase to our existing Carey Sales contract. So that's there. The increase is coming from actually the CARES Act grant. We received $4 million to help us with the installation of equipment. So it is a variety of equipment that we are trying to accommodate, ranging from walk-in walk-in refrigerators and freezers to carts that will help us to distribute food throughout the building, to totes and things to carry and or maintain the temperature of stuff, because we have had to adjust our operations. So the time frame for this is obviously, we're trying to spend a lot of money in a short time, and it is a significant increase. And then I will say that it's because we usually don't have any money at all to spend on large equipment purchases. And that's just because the USDA reimbursement for school meals is really low. So it's historically not a part of our budget. But I would say too, to actually do major upgrades across the board for our district would be a much, much larger number. So it's not, I would say, as significant as it seems in terms of the boost it's going to get, but it will help us to really do some, get some equipment that will help us to accommodate during this time.
But I'm not understanding when you say $4 million annual increase, 4 million annually. If you're buying all the equipment now, and really we're at an increase of needing all the equipment, we really need the equipment right now. What would you do with the equipment you already have? Like our commissioner just asked, but why would you need $4 million annually in addition to what you're asking for?
So we're asking for $4 million because we would like this is part of the grant, and we're trying to spend this by the end of this fiscal year. So that's what it has to do with annually at this point. We may, may or may not receive additional funding, that we may or may not be able to purchase more in forthcoming years. But right now, what this is specifically, the 4 million increases for stuff related to preparing for, various on-site. Now, you also mentioned the fact that some of this is like 10-year life expectancy, right, for this equipment. So some of this is grant equipment that will be capitalized and depreciated over time. This includes both large and small.
Now, see, I understand everything you're saying in reference to holding on to the grant money, but we still have to justify what we're using it for. And it's very difficult to justify if we're already buying equipment with warranty dates on it and just holding money. We have to show that we are using it for specific equipment or what we are using for. We can't just set it aside in case. And I agree. And I think that we need to review the equipment that we're getting. And I'm sure you've already done this to see what other advanced high technology equipment we can get with the additional. We can justify the $4 million each year, instead of just saying is there because we need it, because I don't know. I've never heard of a granting agency that will let you set money aside until you need it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not. So I guess I'm misunderstanding the idea of setting it aside. And I don't know, Kim's there, but we received this money through the CARES Act grant, and it's supposed to be spent by the end of this fiscal year. So that is the reason for the increase for the 1 year.
I have another question.
It's not an annual amount. I'm sorry. I think part of this, I think there was wording in there that was unintentionally misleading. But Liz, if you can confirm that this is, it's a one-time amount from the CARES Act to buy needed equipment that we normally don't have enough available funds to purchase. So they're super needed. They're not extra. They're not extra walk-in freezers. They're not extra carts. They're certainly needed. I think Commissioner Bondima, my guess is that I heard an annual in there too, and I think the implication was $4 million a year, and I think that's unintentional. That's just misleading. This is a one-time $4 million. Use it on good stuff, which we are. But if Liz or Joe could confirm that in fact it isn't $4 million a year, it's $4 million increase this year, and that needs to be spent in a time-limited manner, which we will be able to do, but it isn't increasing our yearly spend on this kind of thing by $4 million a year going forward. Is that part of your question, Commissioner Bondima?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It looks like, the way it's written, it looks like it's $4 million there, which is clear, but then each year will be $4 million, $4 million. No, that's what it looks like when it's written. Because
Yeah, I
you say
think-
the annually 4 million.
We can, yes, I understand that. We will change the wording, Commissioner, to show they were looking to increase 4 million for the school year of 2021. We're not
Right.
looking for 4 million going past this school year, correct, Liz?
We should be so lucky to get 4 million from CARES Act every year to buy these fridges, but unfortunately.
That's what it
not
looks
the
like.
case. Right.
And
Can I jump in? This is really important. I need to get this out. At the end of the written presentation, you said that you did not use minority contractors because what? Because I have 4 reasons why I don't understand why you didn't.
When we looked at this with the MBE office, it was buying equipment, and we're simply buying equipment, and it's being delivered to the school.
So who's so
Yeah.
this doesn't, that the contract that you're getting, does that include transportation, transporting equipment, installing equipment, the service to maintain equipment, and where does equipment get warehoused? So all of that is included in this one contract?
The installation is by the company, by Carey, so that it maintains warranty. They install it. If there is any installation to the site required to hook it up, we city schools perform that work.
So there's no opportunity for minority contractors or other companies to participate in this at all? It's all done by Carey and the Baltimore City Public Schools, just 2 groups?
Yes, Carey delivers it, Carey unboxes it, and Carey plugs it into our existing utilities.
Okay.
If we need to add any additional utilities to the site, then that work is done by city schools employees. We do not.
Okay, they do the
subcontract that out.
servicing. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much. I'm clear.
You're welcome.
I thank the group for the clarification. So me looking at bottom line, 600,000 is coming from the budget. 4 million coming from the CARES Act.
Correct.
Can we put that in the document?
Yes, it is. So
I don't think it is.
it shows the funding source of, let's see, food nutrition. There's different food nutrition.
Okay, I'm talking about the implications. When you go financial and budget implications, can we say 600,000 coming from the budget, 4 million coming from ESSER grant?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Could we circle back a bit to my initial question around if we have any information on the quantifiable numbers of equipment and buildings that these items would be dispersed to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's certainly something we can try to prepare the request for. I felt like I heard this not necessarily in what you said, but I do just want to clarify, this is not going to equipment that's going to go and sit in a warehouse. It is going to be installed in schools directly. And so this is not equipment that we don't need. Most of the equipment that we have in our kitchens currently is well past its depreciable life. So I just want to, I guess, emphasize that this is not going into some abyss or sitting in a warehouse. It will be directly installed and we will be using it. So
that is great perspective and context. Could you, when you have a chance, because you all are doing great work, provide that to the board, because I know that they would, the larger board would appreciate that information about the equipment already being past due date, quite honestly, or expiration date, updating, in addition to the quantifiable numbers of pieces of equipment that'll be dispersed to the building.
Happy to.
Thank you.
That's a great point. We will include that in the agenda item, Commissioner.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. All right, the next item is a contract increase with House and Mechanical from $1,703,900 to $1,788,241 to provide HVAC system upgrades at Edgecombe Circle. It's to install the last two vertical unit packages in the classroom. The original contract was approved by the board on January 14 of 2020. And the last item is a competitively solicited contract with 10 contractors to provide on-call construction management services on an as-needed basis. The estimated total contract amount is $10 million. The contract term is December 9 of 2020 through December 8 of 2023 with 1 2-year renewal option.
Commissioner Bondima or Commissioner Reed, any additional questions?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yes, I do. You have a list of contractors that's doing the work. How do you make a determination that when, or the school system make a determination when there's work that has to be done and determine who does the work? Because you got some heavy hitters in there. And I was concerned about, you have the small businesses and the big businesses, and maybe you selected that group according to each, it's not a duplicate of what they can offer. How do you determine which company or organization or whatever does the work? Who makes the decision? How do you do that?
Hi, this is Cindy Smith. I'm the Director of Design and Construction. I'll grab this, Joe. So according to our procurement policies, actually, it's a rotational basis. So we start at the top and we go down through the list. So the first task, whatever the first task would be given to AECOM as the first one on the list, and they provide us their task proposal for that one, and the next project would then go to the next one. A contractor does have a right to decline a project.
Oh.
Commissioner Bondima, was that your only question? Christian, did we have any public comments?
Muted.
Oh,
I was muted. Did you hear me at all?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Real quick, let me make this real quick. You have a list of 10, and you have contractors on the list. You have some heavy hitters in there. And how do you determine, okay, if you have one particular type of work that needs to be done in one location, and you go to the top of the list and you say, I'll take number 1 first. And then you have people, I looked at the bottom of the list, you have different groups or companies at the bottom of it. How does each of those companies have the equal opportunity to get the job?
It's not an equal, our procurement policy requires a rotational basis. So assuming we have 10 tasks, number 1 goes to the first one, number 2 goes to the second one. Over the duration of the contract, we could have 15 tasks, we could have 1 task. There is no set task requirements, and our policy says that we don't make these, because there are heavy hitters and smallers, we don't make them compete within the contract, because you could then end with the same one getting every task also, that it is a rotational basis.
I'm not clearly understanding that. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not clearly understanding it. We'll have to take it off and talk about it later, but I'm just not clearly understanding how each person has an equal opportunity to get a job. I'm going number one, number two down the list. It sounds like you never get to the middle of the list or the bottom of the list.
Well, it depends. If you have 20 tasks, you get the list twice.
No, I'm saying if you have one task, if each time you have one particular task to do and you start at number one and then come back later and have a task later, you still start at number one.
No, you don't. You go to number two. So if I had a task right now, right, I would go to number one. If I have it, the next task in a month from now goes to number two. The task after that goes to number three. It's a rotation. 10 tasks, and then the 11th task goes back to number one.
If you have a contract, a $1 million contract, and number one gets it, and the next task is $500,000. So there's never any negotiating of who could negotiate a lesser amount to do the job. You don't do that.
So the procurement policy is written to not require competition within the on-call contract, because if there is, you would always have the smaller ones that can typically do jobs for lesser amounts of money, always getting the task. But there's also a maximum. There's no task that can be awarded under this contract for more than $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, did we have anyone sign up for public comment?
No, we didn't.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our operations meeting for today. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations, and my fellow commissioners for your questions. You all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.